This is AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV SuperFriends. For December 23rd, 2020, it's the AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. Well, welcome back, everybody. It's time for another podcast adventure with the AV SuperFriends. We're joined again by two very special guests. If you listened to our last episode, you heard them going into deep dives over production workflows and technologies and interactions between different campus departments, and sometimes not interactions between different campus departments. Well, we're going to continue that discussion in a few minutes. But before we get to that, and given the time of year, as we're kind of wrapping up this end of year thing, and the students are all going home and the instructors are all leaving and the classrooms are all opening wide up and we're able to get in there and do a bunch of work. Well, let's talk real quick about the amount of work that we do or maybe don't do over the Christmas over the holiday break, as it's now known, because of Festivus. And is this something that we are all on the same page on? Is this something we're seeing more of, or kind of, how are we handling that? And of course, I don't know if you guys are the same. It certainly happens to me that we get that same joke from people about like, oh, hey, you guys get Christmas off too, don't you? And it's I guess in my standard response is always no. Actually, this is a really good time for us in the AV world to get out there and actually install a lot of stuff, because all those classrooms are empty and the people are gone, and so we can get around and get a lot done, tearing apart rooms and upgrading them or doing new installs, and it's a fantastic opportunity. However, this year it's a little bit different. I can only speak from IU's perspective. I'm interested to hear what you guys think, but IU has been open all semester, though it probably at about 40 to 50% actual people on campus. So there's been a lot of opportunity to get into spaces and work on some upgrades. But this year for the holidays, or the end of year break or winter break or whatever you want to call it, our break is much longer. It goes from Thanksgiving all the way to the first week in February, with the idea that that's the highest point of flu season. So as a precautionary thing, all the students are going to be taking classes strictly online. For those of us on campus, that means it's a great opportunity to get around and get a lot done, and we've got like 2 full months to do it. So this time, for the first time in anybody's memory, all the way down from the CIO, they basically said, hey, close up shop, especially that week between Christmas and New Year's. Go home, do not come to work, don't work from home, don't do any of that, just don't be here for a full week. So it's prime install time for us, but we're not going to be here. You still have to take vacation time, but as a department, as a division, we are taking that week off. So I guess, how's that playing out for the rest of you guys? This is a prime time for us to get around to do some installs, but are we doing that this year, or is this going to be, business as usual? How are you guys seeing this go out?
No, for you and KC and for me in particular, they kind of because we are behind on so many things from the past 9 months, we're trying to play catch up. And so they're trying to finish everything up by spring. We have not made the announcement that we will be starting late. So we're still working under the presumption of we're starting like the second week of January. And even this year, it's a little different because it is almost a week earlier than normal. And so we're still staring that in the face. Now, kind of like a lot of universities right now, we got the free time after Thanksgiving. That was the unaccounted opening time. The problem was I'm so far behind, I wasn't being, the design and engineer. I didn't have all the drawings. I didn't have all the programming. I didn't have all this stuff done in order to take advantage of this extra 3 weeks we got between Thanksgiving and the end of the semester. And so I'm even further behind because now I have people that are ready to ripped and ready to go. I mean, we even have product, but it's just strange. And I wonder if in most years, I don't mind trying to squeeze in some projects because it's a wonderful time to get things moving. But I also wonder if the panic mode of let's finish all this early isn't going to create more issues. It's like, how much is too much? You think you have 6 weeks, but you really don't. Because by the time you take out the holidays, by the time you take out people's vacations around those holidays, you really only got about 3.5. And so if you try to squeeze 8 weeks worth of work into 3.5 weeks, who's going to swallow that pill when it doesn't work out right? So that's kind of where we're at right now. And I'll be curious to see if we have the similar announcements that Chris was talking about in many other universities. If we're going to push off till February, because that would change everything. But right now,
well, I think you guys already wait until MLK Day, right, to start?
Yes.
So it'd be only an extra 2 weeks for you, but still, yeah.
But it's just a strange. It's just this strange blue moon, solar eclipse. Everything just kind of fell on us. It's just that strange combination of brand new buildings and projects that were delayed, and it's just, I don't know, man. It's going to be that kind of year, I guess.
So I guess I'm going to be the asshole here and say that normally pre-COVID, we have always had 3 weeks off for Christmas, shut down, everybody go home, no one works. The past couple, 3 years, it's been driven down.
Larry
whatever.
is gesturing wildly.
2 weeks. Now, on top of this, Chris, that is not our vacation time. We do not have to take vacation for that. It is free and clear
I'm going to gesture
money.
wildly.
So
is
now
that a single finger
rolling
gesture?
back. Yeah, right. So Western's been
Both
great
barrels.
about having this 3 weeks off for Christmas thing for a long time.
Does that impact your ability to get work done those times? Do you see that as lost time, or is it just don't worry about it?
No. Well, here's kind of the flip side to that. So pre-COVID, that's just lost time, and we may or may not have contractors going into buildings that we give keys and like, hey, prep this room for electrical, prep this, prep that, and we pre-plan a lot of this stuff normally. But we have what we call a J term, where there's only a few classes peppered in around campus for all of January pretty much. And we can go and hit rooms really hard before we go to break, because we actually have 1 to 2 weeks from when finals are had to when we get let out for our break. Now, when COVID hit, they said, okay, we are going to plan to release everybody at Thanksgiving. No one's coming back. So back in April, May, whenever that plan took place or whenever that happened, we said, okay, well, we're going to plan all of these installs for Thanksgiving till we leave for break this Christmas, which is only 2 weeks this year. And then we pick back up in January, and then we do more installations for 2 to 3 weeks. And then we go back to full-time classes, which I'm kind of with Jamie on this. We're still having in-person classes, I think, but I don't know what's officially announced yet. I'm assuming that we're going to push that off, go remote only, and then bring them full-time face-to-face or whatever halfway through the semester. But nonetheless, it really works out for us, and a lot of people get a lot of time off.
Yeah, one of the pleasant surprises when I moved from IU here to UNC Greensboro was they shut down the entire campus between Christmas and New Year's, which it's been a long time since I've had that. We have to take like 1 day vacation, but the rest of it, campus is closed. So that part has been nice. And to kind of follow along with what Jamie and others have said, like, we lost so much time on our summer replacement cycle that we're taking the time from Thanksgiving till classes start again, the day after Martin Luther King, I think, is when they start. And we're trying to shove as many standard classroom installs in that time period as we can, minus the week between Christmas and New Year's. And so I think we've got 16 standard classrooms we're installing. Plus, we've got a new nursing building with, 30, 40 rooms, somewhere in that range coming online. Plus, we're swapping out 70 computers across campus as well. So we're, full steam ahead until Christmas. then we're leaving it, and then we're coming back and trying to get everything else in place before classes start, just trying to not even catch up, but get to a place where that come early summer, we can maybe get through the replacement cycle to the point that where we should be starting at from.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have work. Don't get me wrong. I mean, and it's not necessarily that I want to be in a position where like, well, I don't have anything to do. I'll just take off 4 weeks. But just, yeah, I mean, that's reality for some people right now.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have the work, but it's kind of the planning and forethought wasn't put in. It was just everybody just assumed that there was nothing going on. Which is, like Chris alluded to earlier, it's weird because everybody just assumes you have it off. And then now everybody just assumes you're going to work the whole time and get everything done. And you're just like, well, there's some kind of middle area.
Yeah, I think at OSU, like, we're finally catching up to like May, June on all the little one-off projects that we put off all year. So we're getting a lot of that done, but we're not going to really start in class in person teaching. And my guess is going to be like, if we get there before summer, I'll be surprised. So we have lots of time to kind of do that deferred maintenance. We didn't promise anybody anything really over the holiday break. If we can get to things and people want to work, we're doing that. But like Chris, the university said, hey, go home if you can. Go spend time with your family. We don't have students around. There's nobody like destroying the classrooms right now. So we have time. We're just going to kind of continue to flex that into spring, most likely, kind of catch up where we can and, get rid of Flash wherever we have to.
I think it's that last point you mentioned. Well, okay, the second last point, not Flash, but the fact that there aren't students around. I think that was kind of the impetus to like, we're emptying out campus physically. There's still probably, on a campus the size of IU Bloomington, there's probably still 1,500, 2,000 people here doing all the maintenance and all the IT stuff and all the AV. So there's still a lot of people there, but I think they're just like, look, there's students aren't here. The instructors aren't here. Just, take the week, be gone, go somewhere else. I think that was kind of the impetus. I'm curious to see, is this going to play out for the future? Because it sounds like at UNC Greensboro and WKU, they've already kind of had this model there. Will this play out next year, the year after, that sort of thing, or even this idea of these little J terms, these JN terms, which IU is creating for the first time, a deliberate, like, here's a little 3 or 4 weeks session. You can take a 1-credit class and just kind of knock that one out. I mean, are we going to see that sort of flexibility? So I'll be curious to see how that plays out. But yeah, it's an interesting Christmas season, if nothing else.
I've been told the reason why we have kept ours for so long is mainly because they tried to take it away 4 to 5 years ago, and because no one was getting raises. I haven't got a raise in probably 10 years or more. That you're going to lose a lot more people if you take this block of this free vacation away, because they're still making not very much money. So that was the argument that I heard a lot.
Well, it sounds like we're split pretty well on who's going to be super busy and who's going to, be counting the hoof prints in the snow. So, I don't know. I guess
can say that the team at IU is going to be very busy in general throughout that time. I personally will not, because I've managed to push that stuff off. But we'll be interested to see how it plays out.
Chris will be on the beach.
Yep.
In Indiana.
On the beach.
In Indiana. The beach in Indiana.
There is an Indiana beach.
Oceanfront property in Indiana.
In Gary, Indiana. Beautiful downtown Gary, Indiana.
Beautiful, beautiful country right there.
All right. Well, we've got a second part of a discussion with some folks on video production and athletics. So let's return to that.
And welcome back, everybody. We are continuing our sports talk radio conversation with our two guests today, Jeff and Jordan. At this part of the conversation, I want to dabble a little bit into staffing. I know you both mentioned before that you wear some different hats, and one of them may be crewing a little bit. And what does that look like? And that in itself can be a massive undertaking. So, Jeff, I'll throw it to you. Kind of, you've done some various pieces of this. I know back in the day you did a lot more, but what's typical, and what are you crewing when we say crewing? What does that actually entail?
So crewing is hiring and scheduling the staff for the production. So depending on the production depends on what staff you have. For example, for Oregon State, when we have a video board show like a basketball game, we have a director TD, a replay operator, and 2 to 3 cameras depending on the game. For a football game, you would have probably 3 times that. Over my career, when I started out, I crewed everything from, at that point, we weren't doing a lot of broadcasts, but all of our video board shows and any specialty events. And at that time, we had to create a student program because when we went from doing a football game 6-7 times a year, it wasn't that expensive to hire professionals for every game. But then when you add in an arena, all of a sudden you've got probably 30 to 40 basketball games to staff, 12 volleyball games, some wrestling meets, gymnastics meets. That gets pretty expensive. So we formulated an intern program, which was, we had a new media communications program, which we funneled some kids through, as well as students from any other program on campus. And trying to, at that point, even now, trying to schedule students is in itself a full-time job, just because of commitment issues they have. Their tests come up, studying comes up. Over the last couple of years, I have transitioned some of that role to within our athletics department. But then the taking on of broadcasts, I've taken on the crewing for those, which is even more than a board show. And that's working with a lot of freelancers and trying to make, part of that battle is trying to come up with rates that is attractive to them, but not typically your standard rate when you're working for a full network show. So there's a lot of different aspects to crewing, and a lot of it is it's a personality game. And
absolutely. So it sounds like you have a mix of maybe some in-house staff, some independent contractors, some students where possible. I'm interested in the Kentucky side. Does your organization kind of have the same kind of approach? Are you kind of doing mostly university staff, or do you have a mix of some contractors and students as well?
So before Jordan gets started, I want to introduce and what my vision is of how he runs this show. So I believe that his area is probably the largest employer of student workers on campus. Now, I could be wrong, maybe Aramark or restaurants, but I really do think that he manages a zoo of students. And what they pull off on football game days and basketball game days, I interact with them a little bit more on basketball just because there's more face-to-face time there. They're super courteous, super professional, and it's not like really anywhere else that you go on campus when you interact with student workers. So I don't know how the hell you pull this off, Jordan, but let's figure this out and teach us how you deal with all these crazy students and getting them to man the cameras and stay in the control booth and actually do things that they're going to possibly be doing later on in life. And I would argue, Jordan, that you say you don't work a lot in academics, but the way you pull this off, you're a very good teacher, or somebody is on your staff, and making sure that everything's done in a professional manner. So take it away, Jordan.
Here's the brilliant part of everything I would do. Our training program is student run. So we require our students to train each other. And this is the way it was done when I came here. I wanted to run the graphics computer, so I needed to train on it to learn what I was doing. But the guy that was running the graphics computer wanted to run handheld for basketball, so he needed to train somebody to take over for him. So it worked out for both of us. We have a lot of really great staff on campus that help, specifically in my area, help with production. People really care about it. Storytelling is the center of everything we do, and we have some people that are really passionate about it. That applies to everything we do technically as well. So the reason we appear to be so successful at it is because people are driven towards success. That's what every student
Now, let me
is
ask
here for.
this.
They want us to succeed.
So is that, in your opinion, do you think that's partly because of our J&B program and the national recognition it has, and we're able to peel resources from that? Or where do you see this, and how did it start off? Because this is a well-oiled machine here.
So I think that's the core of it. There's a large group of students that this is what they want to do for their career. We go out, we partner with the Office of Admissions and attend information fairs and recruitment events, and we go and pitch students like, hey, if this is what you want to do, here's an opportunity that's on campus for you. And it's not always the kids that are, I keep saying kids, of course they're adults. Not always people that are going to go and major in TV or film. Sometimes it's the creative writing major who maybe isn't exactly going to compose images for the rest of their life, but they really enjoy storytelling and they want to find a different way to do it. Or maybe it's a math major who wrote for their student newspaper or worked in their high school student TV station and really wants to continue that. We keep it really open, but the passion for storytelling is what keeps it consistent.
So how many students? Go ahead,
I'm
Jamie.
really glad to hear. I'm really glad to hear you guys do that, because when I was coming through school, that was my thing, right? Radio and TV production, and the first university I went to, they didn't involve a lot of the students, and so I looked for another place, and I went somewhere where you had to apply for your job, and it was a volunteer job, right? Like I'm paying a lot of money to do this job. They're not paying me, but it was so important to get that experience for my eventual career in radio that was short-lived because they don't pay well. But yeah, my career in audio video production was short when I started having multiple children and realized that insurance wasn't wonderful in that field. So I'm really glad you guys do that, because I hear again and again from other universities where this is a prime opportunity for those students, those kids, to get experience in their field. It saves you guys. It gives them, and these sometimes the ones that do this are the most passionate, and the fact that you give them that chance and allow them to do that, I think that's great, because I know how valuable it was for me, and I like hearing that. And I know from maybe a little bit close experience within a university, they maybe I work with closely, possibly soon now, that they don't necessarily like to do that. They think it's a burden to include the students. And so I just want to throw that in there. I think it's cool that you guys are doing that. And you're not the only ones, but again, kudos.
Yeah, and just like Jamie said, I chose my school because they had a broadcasting program that employed students as well. And I got to work camera for PBS shows all through my university experience. And it was hugely valuable. I didn't end up going that career, but I worked in my local news station as a hobby for like 10 years after school, just because it was still fun and I still enjoyed it. But yeah, just getting those students in, and it is... I learned as much from working beside professionals as I did in my official classes. So I think even though you say you're not in academics, you're still a tremendous teaching force for those students.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, I think one of our struggles is we don't have a journalism program, that it's difficult to find those students that are interested. When I was a student here, they didn't really have a journalism program, but they had a club, a broadcast club, that they had advisors and staff that did help teach, that it was student run. They had a news program that you started out in to learn. And shortly after I graduated, that kind of just, there wasn't a lot of effort in that. And that's kind of where, even when I started our student program, you notice that trend going down, is there's not that fundamental education. And unfortunately, us being such a small department, trying to find time to do really good training, it's hard. And so we do a lot of training on the job or during games. I think I think that's a huge benefit, is the journalism programs or the schools with the journalism programs.
Yeah, and I think, Jeff, you have a really interesting view from it because you came up through that, right? You came as a student within Oregon State, and then we recognized, I think, as I was coming in to the university to work, that the story was always told, but this kid's too good to let get away. And I think they were like, we got to make sure that we can keep, he's far too knowledgeable now of all of our systems. So if we don't have him here, we're not gonna know what's going on if he leaves. But I want to kind of ask both of you, like, if you're a student and maybe you have some interest in it, like, where do you start? Like, and are there positions do you think are best suited or tailored for students to be involved with? I know, Jeff, you do a lot of replay things, or maybe start them on DAC or something like that. Like, can you share like what that student kind of experience micro career would look like, and kind of where does it make sense to kind of get somebody who may be interested but may not know where to go, or what are good roles for them to kind of try it out?
I tell new
Jeff,
people,
or Jordan, go for it,
sorry.
Jordan.
Sorry, the first thing we teach everybody that does training with us is how to over under, and then we tell them that if you can do this, you can earn a paycheck.
You just won an Emmy. You just won an Emmy, an Oscar. What else do they give away? Because good Lord, I taught my own kids and my wife how to do it. I'm like, by God, I'm tired of these rat nest extension cords, and I taught them how to do it. So
my 7-year-old knows how.
And yeah, and if you can't pick it up, if you can't figure it out, you shouldn't do this. And that's the conversation that we have with people. Like, if this isn't something that works for you, this isn't something you should do. But it also, inside of a sports production, it's a really great vantage point to see what's going on. Especially if you're with a handheld op or sideline cam at football or something, it's both fast paced and slow enough that you can get in and get caught up. That's where we try to start people. We also try to give really, really new people with no experience at all an opportunity to just come and kind of shadow. That seems like not the most exciting thing in the world, but when you've never seen anything before, it's kind of eye opening. So, and then they're the kids that
agree with that.
Yeah, they're the kids that know this is what they want to do, and maybe you can let them dive in a little bit deeper. But we try to get people as much hands-on opportunities as we can. But utility is the best place to start that for us.
And is there any position where you haven't had students, or may not be a good fit? Maybe not starting off, but is there anything off limits, or can a student come in and aspire to take on any role within your organizations?
For us, yes. I don't think there's anything we've not had a student do. The goal is for people to want to learn to do everything. We've had a few people that have been able to do everything and excelled at doing everything. From engineer to directing, it doesn't really matter. It's not all for everybody, but if somebody comes in, starts with us as a freshman, we have enough games and other production opportunities. They have enough time. Justin started to ask how many students we have on the crew, and it varies. Our paid crew is usually around 35 to 40 people. Not so much the last 12 months, but the last year that I really counted hours, we had over 20,000 hours of paid student labor that went through our crew. That's a couple full-time employees. That's like 10 full-time people.
Yeah, I was going to say it's at least 50 for redundancy, and because these students have other things going on, and that's got to be a chore just to be able to schedule and staff and keep up with everything.
We have one student that all they do, we call them our logistics coordinator, and they help manage class schedules and people. A lot of kids right now have second jobs, and then there are all the other programs and clubs they're in. So everybody works really hard to help manage schedules and communicate.
How about you, Jeff? Similar kind of experience there? I don't think we're necessarily as deep on our student pool, but I think the process is very similar.
Yeah, I think the process is similar. I think prior to the change in who was handling students, the only real position we'd never put a student in was replay operator. We'd get a couple seniors at a time to at the time direct like volleyball and women's basketball. And then with how successful our women's basketball program is, we've been putting professional directors in that. I think ultimately my goal would be to build up student crews, because as we take on these games for the networks, is students who really prove themselves and work hard and develop skills, is trying to put them in more positions in these broadcasts as a reward, because it not only does it pay more, but it gives them that professional experience. They can say, hey, I ran camera for a Pac-12 game, or I was an A2 for a television broadcast. But I think we've had so much turnover that I hope someday we get there.
I was going to ask you both that. Are there specific stories of any students you may have worked with that have continued on within broadcast and went on to bigger, better things, or potentially, or are there ones that may have shown up day one and weren't sure that excelled through it and kind of changed their path by going through it? Or just, are there any stories that come to the top of your head?
I've got a couple. In fact, even when our student broadcast club was even bigger, some of my better students were business students. And one of them, I believe, is still with the Blazers. I don't know his exact role, but I believe he works with a lot of they package their games completely in-house. And I believe he does a lot with the sponsorship side for rolling out or commercial breaks, and even streaming. And then I've got another former student that is a production coordinator with Pac-12 Networks now. So and then a few of them have just become full-time freelancers. And I'm guessing 2 out of the 4 or 5 I'm thinking of were the only ones who really knew they wanted to go into this when they started. The others just kind of liked it, and that's where they've ended up.
Gotcha. What about your side, Jordan? Similar kind of thing, or more or less?
I'll continue my utility being the greatest thing ever theme. There were a pair of guys about 8 or 9 years ago that were on our crew that turned their skill set at utility into jobs on Monday Night Football. They were core utilities. One of them's moved on he's more or less a tech manager for Major League Baseball, and the other is now the V1 for Monday night. So they're probably 32, 33, something like that. But starting with their junior year, they traveled themselves to every Monday night game, and then earned a spot to be on the travel crew. And that, really shows what over under does for you. Then we've had quite a few alumni move on to broadcast jobs. We're lucky to have students that's what they want their careers to be, but specifically in sports production. There were a trio of guys that were at the NBA bubble, did 105 days straight. One of them left and went and did the U.S. Open in that bubble. 3 of those guys and a 4th one won Emmys on the ESPN crew for the Open from the year before. There's a lot of stuff. There's one of the best handheld ops we've ever had for basketball. Went to work on a show called Snapped as a producer and videographer. She worked up from videographer to producer, and then got a little tired of the monotony of network television and left and became a firefighter. So, but she utilizes her skill set from her days here. So she's a public information officer for the fire department she works for. And still,
we're all just firefighters at the end of the day. We're all just firefighters.
So this is a question for Jeff and Jordan. I would say, do you all see any shift in supply and demand of these students based on previous years, minus all the COVID crap, of course? But do you still see students interested in broadcast, or is it different than it was 5 years ago for recruiting? Or I guess talk a little bit about that.
I think it's different. I feel like there's been this shift. So it's one of the important things I tell students is this is very much an industry where you have to work your ass off and you have to prove yourself or you're not going to work. or you're not going to get work. You don't just come out of college and apply to be a director or a camera operator. And so I think there's been some advisors within our campus that tell students, don't work for free, don't work for cheap. Like, you're better than that, or you're worth more than that. And that, I think, what has contributed to killing or slowing down the recruitment of students. I think post-COVID is going to be interesting because I think there are a lot of freelance contractors out there that are going to find new careers. And so I see a demand growing depending on kind of where the future of production goes. If it goes more remote, more automation, which is kind of where things have been going. There's a lot of the networks are doing at-home productions where they're hiring they have a staff that comes in and does 3 games in a day rather than various truck shows. So it'll be interesting to see where that demand goes, if it grows or if it continues to shrink, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think for us, there's been a big change. 5 years is probably about the right time frame to judge it from. For us, we've launched a film program in that time as the university, and a BFA last year in film, and that changed the demands on the students quite a bit, especially when we start talking about Saturdays in the fall. But then also, I think before they get here, what they're hearing from guidance counselors in high school is try 100 different things. And I think post-COVID, we're going to find out the fear of missing out is going to contribute to that even more. And, I run into kids all the time on the crew that, or even, applicants and things like that will list 24 extracurricular activities. And I just asked, do you think you have time for 10 hours a week to work on projects? And, many of them can't schedule a meeting to have the rest of that conversation. And that's just time management isn't something that I think is getting focused on. And the other thing I'll say about the last 5 years, a question I've started asking to our crew is, how many people is this your first job? And it has slowly dwindled down. Last fall, when I asked that question, there was only one person out of 26 that were in the room that had a job before.
Wow. That's, in thinking about where I am now and where I started working on a farm, getting a paycheck at 13 years old, and was a student worker at WKU doing IT work, and knew exactly what I was going to do after college, at least in technology wise. I didn't find AV until a few years after that, but that's like, I didn't even think of that. That's a big challenge for you guys to recruit students at the same level that I've seen at least Jordan utilize in recent years.
Yeah, a little work ethic sets you apart.
Absolutely. So I think the takeaways here is that time management and learn to over-under, because it's a life skill. You can get an Emmy one day for that, or you could be working for.
And you actually have to work to earn money. You have to do stuff.
Yeah, you have to work. Got to work.
You can't sit there and look pretty.
Yeah, let's take a moment here. We'll catch our breath, take a quick break. We'll come back, and we'll get out our crystal balls and kind of see what maybe the future holds for our broadcast side and some of the production workflows that we might see on the horizon. So hang out for a little bit, and we'll be right back.
As many of you know, the Super Friends have always been better received when we have more input from you. So here's your chance. Send us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and get involved with the show. We're looking for some topics to discuss, some fellow nerds to talk to, or just general AV awesomeness to brag about. But remember, we'll probably steal your ideas. And I suppose we'd take some criticism, but that wouldn't be very nice. Anyway, drop us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and find out how quickly we ask you to join this nonsense.
All right. Welcome back in, everyone. We're continuing our conversation with Jeff and Jordan, our broadcast gurus from the universities. And we talked about a lot of different things. We talked about some student workers, independent contractors. But I want to ask both of you kind of, what do you see on the horizon? As we mentioned previously, COVID is changing a lot of people's workflows, and, have either of you started looking at potential different workflows, the wholesale, kind of what it is we're doing now, or is there anything interesting you'd like to see kind of maybe building out towards? Jeff, kind of start with you. What are you seeing, or what do you hope happens, or is there anything you would like to see happen?
I'm seeing a lot more at home, like vMix style productions. There's a lot of tools that can help make that possible. I think the biggest question is when you start putting crew at home, can you do that for an in-venue production just because of latency? Versus, I mean, a broadcast has been done, and there's a lot of broadcasts, ESPN, Fox, Pac-12 networks. They're doing remote production as it is, where their control rooms are not on site, and even that's being done with little latency. But I think it's still more than what you would expect for a video board show. So I think the question is, as you try to consolidate things or move them to where people can do their jobs from home, you potentially save money and facility costs, as well as post-COVID. I'm sure people are going to be more careful about viruses in general. And so where does that technology look? How can you make that happen? We've been looking at that at vMix for a little while, as well as remote desktoping into systems. I know for like on a broadcast, you could remote desktop a bug operator in. Potentially some of the replay systems you could, if your remote desktop software allows USB through, and you're using a USB controller, you could remote those systems. I think there's a lot of different directions you can go, and I think in a traditional broadcast it works, and I think trying to find that for an in-venue experience, how does that work?
I think that's interesting.
Sorry, I feel like I just rambled.
No, I think it's interesting that you brought that up because, many of us are used to the fact that on a live production, that if there's a minute delay, 2 minutes delays, nobody really knows, right? Because everybody's at home and you're already getting it 17 different ways from Sunday. And we've all experienced the sports bar thing where somebody's phone is 10 seconds ahead of somebody's TV. And then even the TV across the way is 10 seconds behind that. But that's something that I personally haven't even thought about, was that in the venue, on the local screens, you can't afford that. You can't have a replay, you can't afford the graphic. You can't afford that to happen 2-3 minutes after the fact. It's just, oh, hey, we got a scoring update in basketball, and there's only been 12. So that's really interesting. I'm kind of glad you brought that up because it's not something that I was thinking about until you said that the two different shows that usually happen simultaneously makes it really difficult to do from afar.
It's that real-time network.
Yeah, and
stuff
I know
again,
Jordan.
Right?
I know Jordan had a challenge, and talk a little bit about this because your primary role on game days has usually been that video board. A lot of money, a lot of advertising comes into that. And now all of a sudden here comes Justin Rexing wanting his damn replay, and you got to deal with me now. So I guess talk about that workflow a little bit, and what do you see that being in the future? Do you see what I do on game days change? Because I don't have a clue, Jordan. You tell me.
Yeah, I just look at it all as, mitigating operator error. So you fit in with everybody else.
Right.
Oh, in
Absolutely.
that case, you're super fired.
Yeah, I'm surprised I haven't been kicked out of replay as it is.
Like I just kind of look at it as, for us with our partnership with athletics, that it's really all live video content. Where it lands isn't that big of a thing. So for the addition of official replay for us, it's just it really, once we got into the digital world with official replay, when it was a crossover, it was a little bit of a handicap to convert and things like that, just making equipment work. But it almost feels so simple now, and I think just the structure of the transition to DV Sport has really helped with that. The infrastructure that they've provided is just a higher caliber and much more reliable. So I've really kind of zoned out on a few of the old war stories of of things you had to go through on game days. But
it was a learning process for me, as you know, obviously, and being involved with that. Do you see anything that you're doing going virtual, or have you talked with your staff and your engineers and all the people that you work around? What do you see updates regarding your infrastructure at WKU? And what I mean by infrastructure is not cabling, but your equipment that you're using, right? Because we know WKU right now is we're doing okay on money, better than we thought. We don't really know what the future holds, and everybody's a little tight on budgets right now, but things have to get updated. Our stuff that we deal with breaks, whether it's classrooms or meeting rooms or large venues or video boards. What does that look like at WKU?
that's like such a hot topic really this week. We had a $13,000 card fell in a router, and then that makes us have a conversation about, do we need to spend $120,000 to replace the router, or what can we do as a band-aid kind of thing to get through. It's really the multi-viewer and our router is locked up, so it's set for basketball, not a big deal. But it really triggered like a 4-hour conversation yesterday about what's the future of our truck. It's an 8-year-old chassis. It's got really not a lot of miles on it, but 8 years is a long time when you start talking about turning stuff off and on and off and on and off and on and bounce down the road for 40,000 miles. Yeah, right. So it just started a really big conversation. We do a little bit of virtualized stuff to support and remote access to support right now. That's been a little bit of a convenience factor for some of the DAC gear with our 2018 upgrade for that, and just kind of to facilitate before some of the fiber was in. But when we look at kind of the physical separation that we needed to do for COVID, those things have really come to tie in. For us, so much that we do is still rooted in like a traditional broadcast equipment setup and format, and then the mechanisms we have to serve. But IP is probably the future for us. What exactly that means, it's hard to say today.
Are you playing with NDI yet or anything?
So yeah, we bought for a show we added a post-game basketball show. We bought a TriCaster Mini because it needed to be ad served and separate from our TV broadcast. It actually got COVIDed away for this season, but that gave us we'd never just utilized a new tech device before, and not really played with NDI. But our dynos, our replay devices in our truck are really the first thing starting to go away. Parts aren't available; they're just not making the cards anymore. So we have a 3-play that we just purchased. Price point comparison, it's a fifth of the price of what our dynos were. So that's kind of what we look at as our conversation point is that it's a band-aid, but maybe it's the real solution. So far, pretty solid, a bit more intuitive than the replay devices we have been using. So we'll see, but it's a wide open world right now.
Yeah,
a lot of gear selections we're trying to look at are more what I'll say commodity based. So things that really vMix solutions like that, OBS, start to fit into, because they really just want a platform to run on top of, not the platform is your device.
Yeah, and I know that we all have talked about on the integration side, if you will, of AV, a lot of this broadcast technology is overlapping in the classrooms. I know Mark has updated a lot of his classrooms with SDI cameras because of facilities cost. I'm concentrating on a lot of NDI research to get 2 cameras into Zoom rooms so that I don't have to pay for power. I mean, we're spending $7,000 a room on facilities costs like power and pathways and all of that crap. So it's a lot of this stuff we can start actually having intelligent conversations about, Jordan.
For sure, we'll play around with something. So the PTZs we're using at basketball are Bird Dog P200s, which are ODI cameras.
Yeah, we just put P100s in a church to save them $10,000 on power. So all this stuff is overlapping now, and it's super powerful, and it works. Once you get it to work, like I've heard you say this before, Jordan, multiple times. Once you get it to work, it works. So it's right on the edge of that for us as well on the integration side.
I think you guys both spoke about kind of infrastructure and glass and network on the first part of our previous show, and I think, Jeff, we're now going down that full IP pathway, right? We're looking at quad encoders and decoders to backhaul cameras around campus, and which 5 years ago we never would have been able to do that. Other campuses, remote campuses where we don't have glass or true infrastructure, it's true IP, and the ability to be able to bring in some of that complete virtual or IP endpoint, and looking at solutions like vMix and things like that, it kind of goes back to that last conversation we had about students. And at some point, offering the students that virtualized experience is almost probably more valuable than the older methodology of work. And we've kind of had this conversation in some other venues where it's people are at home training themselves right now as we speak, as lockdowns happen, things like that. And there's new workflows that they're adopting and there's efficiencies they're adopting. To expect to just throw them back into the old world when we return, they're going to think that it's like having training wheels on again. Like, why are you forcing me to have to touch this or have to do that when I was at home at my kitchen table, I could just do this all from an application. So, and I think that goes both ways in the broadcast side and also in our classroom and traditional academic design. Like, at some point we're going to have to say, yep, we're virtualizing some of these things because that's what people are going to expect. All the iPhone users don't want flip phones. They want to have the touch phone. So, how much of that are we baking into our future thought process on our broadcast side, like where it just doesn't even make a logistical sense to provide the old methodology because the students are going to be better served, or our staff or the directors, producers are better served by a new streamlined, thinner style production workflow, right? Are you seeing any of that?
Well, and I'm going to add to that before you answer. I want to add to that a little bit and say, it's quite possible also that the advent of vMix and OBS and streaming, and now we start throwing that in as these are students, these are young people who are gamers who probably have a better grasp upon NDI and OBS and streaming protocols and getting the best video quality that's possible from their bedroom that we've ever had. And do you see that those new technologies, the familiarity with it, the education the self-education they had start bleeding over into what you guys are going towards?
I think it does. I mean, vMix itself is a very inexpensive software. OBS is free. And the students streaming to, or students, the kids, and I use kids because they're streaming to Twitch
old,
anyways.
Yeah, we're all getting old. That's why.
They're streaming to Twitch hours on end, making money. So and they're learning the platform. I look from our academic side. We have how many control rooms built out with PTZs in classrooms to record or stream these classes. Most of those cameras can stream out H.264 natively. We could spin up some servers on campus running vMix or OBS that are bringing those cameras in, and all of a sudden you could have these students that before we hired to sit in a room to run these classes can do it from their bedroom. Even our staff, and it's going to be cheaper than building out those control rooms that we've historically had.
Well, I think it does change the paradigm, like where, a video engineer before, like we had racks and stacks and we were, dealing with that and untangling cables as our life. But there's a new edge of skill set that it's kind of the virtualized video engineer, right? And it's like, that's a brave new world. And how do we kind of take that head on and say, we're going to embrace this from a design standpoint and build around this to not only lower our costs, but also add a needed experience that students can actually benefit from in the end, right? So I think there's a lot to come, and I think you're right. Thinking the student experience that are at home, the streamers and things, they're training themselves in video engineering without even knowing it, right? It's happening. So.
I mean, and I think sports in itself is going to be interesting. How much of that can really be virtualized, especially I'd say in the 5 to 10 year mark, just because of how fast it is and how much goes into it. But outside of the sports industry, I mean, I keep seeing articles on how award shows have been done during COVID, and I mean, a lot of it is vMix and remote kits being shipped out to people's homes that they're operating out of, and then they ship it back. And I mean, the whole entertainment industry during COVID has adapted so fast, and you hear that they spent 6 months before working towards that, not because of COVID, just because that's where they wanted to take the industry, but then they were forced into it. And I mean, early on, it was a little rough, but I mean, if you look at award shows from April to just in the last weeks, and you can't even tell the difference now.
No, I think that's, it's real, right? We can't ignore it. And I think it's going to change every one of our jobs at some level. We're not going to have that box in front of us. And so it's a complete virtualized environment. But it's not going to go away. I can't imagine it's going to just walk off into the the sunset on us here. I think there's more in that conversation to come for sure. But I want to kind of, round out this show. I think, we've kind of went through a lot of good content today. I want to kind of give you each a moment to kind of wrap up. And is there anything that you want to kind of tell people about, or things that you're kind of on the front of your mind here? Jordan, Jeff, we do appreciate you coming in and sticking around with us here, the AV Super Friends. But, you guys probably have an AD screaming somewhere trying to get both of you guys. There's probably an event happening or not happening that you're probably needed at. So Jordan, any last kind of closing pieces you want to get out there on, either on the student experience, a future experience, or anything bubbling at the top of your mind?
Just if you have a college-bound student that wants to work in broadcast television or something close to it, WKU is a great place to find a home and a great place to prepare for your career. So go Tops.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming in, hanging out with us, Jordan. And Jeff, anything kind of last hoorah from you on your side?
I think not that we have the best program, but if this is an industry you want to get into, find a way to make yourself known and work hard. Don't give up. It can be a tough industry to get into, but it's definitely rewarding, and going through the trenches is definitely worth it in the end.
Excellent. Well, all right, gentlemen. Thanks for hanging out with us today, and we'll cut you back free. You can go get to all those texts and emails and things that were blowing up in the background that you couldn't be on top of in the last however many hours we've been here. Thanks again for hanging out with us and AV Super Friends, and we'll welcome you guys back again. We're going to kind of do more of this sports talk in the future, and hopefully we can have you guys back. All right, so we will go to a quick little break here, and we'll see you on the other side.
There's a great new digital magazine from Higher Ed AV Media found at higheredav.com, and we do a special monthly show where we actually stay on topic. It's a show where we try to really focus on a single topic and break it down into AV Super Friends style. That's AV Super Friends on topic, found at avsuperfriends.com, higheredav.com, iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts from.
So for our last little bit here, this is probably the last segment of the last show of the year for us. So we'll see you in 2021. But before we do that, we're all going to go around real quick and share our New Year's resolutions. So this is going to be something we're going to talk about. We're going to continue doing something we've been doing and want to maybe build on that. We're going to stop doing something we've been doing we don't want to do anymore. I mean, we'll finally break that habit. Maybe we have a professional goal we want to accomplish, or just somehow we're going to improve AV. What's our goals for next year, for 2021? I'll start off my New Year's resolution: 720p 2-channel audio, because that's the joke. No, that's your default EDID fixes all your problems. No, but seriously, my New Year's resolution, I want to focus more on the business side of business side of higher ed. I think that means, but the business side of higher ed AV, I want to look, the working on estimates and budgets and total cost of ownership. I want to put more focus on that. And just I think that's an important thing that often gets overlooked because universities, you just kind of blow through it and you'll figure it out later, sort of thing. But I want to spend more time kind of on the front side of the project work, just because I see a lot of interest or a lot of growth there, and I personally have an interest in that. So, Larry, how about you?
So I had a Facebook memory pop up earlier in the week of a group of my student workers when I was first starting out in higher ed. In a group of 5, I had 3 of my students who did all my Crestron programming, 1 student who did all my BiAmp DSP configuration, and another student who managed all my immersives across campus. For literally 2 summers, all I did was walk around campus and drink coffee. It was pretty awesome. So my New Year's resolution is to try to figure out how to improve our process here so that I can get back to spending all my summers walking around campus and drinking coffee. I don't do enough of that right now. How about you,
More
Justin?
coffee for sure.
Justin,
What's yours?
Next, me? Oh, okay. So I guess mine's going to be really simple because it's been something that's really getting under my skin because I know it's going to just smack us in the face later. I'm trying to get batteries out of UIs in classrooms, iPads for Zoom rooms, right? So we're looking at solutions, low-cost solutions on touch panels for Zoom UIs, just PoE, no battery, because it's going to save us a lot of heartache later on. Mark?
Cool, simple, safe. I like it.
Yeah, right. For me, basically, I'm going to try to be a little more transparent in project management process. It's really kind of admin focused. What's coming up, what we're doing a little more dashboarding with what's going on in the classroom experience as far as what's on deck for projects and kind of what the staff are doing. It's twofold. One, to kind of keep people from breathing down our neck as to what's going on, but also a little bit more transparent on timings and kind of what minutia really exists within projects. So I'm doing a lot of kind of automation stuff on a kind of project intake and kind of process and how we can report that out to people and kind of what we are doing with our time and kind of what projects are going on. That's for me. What about you, Jamie? What do you got for us?
Every year I try to find something new to me, right? And try to do something different. And one of the things on my checklist has been for a long time. In fact, I've purchased several Raspberry Pis and never really did anything with them. And I would really like to experiment with that, like and learn like the Python programming language. Now that helps me professionally as well with a lot of the manufacturers moving that way. But I would really like to tinker a little bit more and kind of wrap my head around something that's not strictly AV related, because it always wraps back around to be AV related. I was tinkering with RGB light strips at one time, and then I ended up putting them in systems and admin conference rooms, right? Because I now knew how they worked. I knew what to do. So that's something that this next year I'd really like to dive into and use the free code academies and such and try to catch up a little bit on that, because configuration can take me a long ways, but understanding some of the more modern syntax that everybody's using, I think would benefit me and some of the little things I'm trying to do.
Well, there you have it. There's some New Year's resolutions from 5 knuckleheads all around the country. Happy New Year, everybody. Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV Super Friends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV Super Friends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.